Hello, how was your analog holiday? Oh, you're still beautifully muted. Come sit on my left here.
For some reason, my hello there, Edgar. My mouse had lost itself.
We were just talking about computer mice.
Yeah,
Yeah, had a good break away from it all.
lovely. Yep, beautiful weather. Basically, we were basically out walking every day, so I've been delightfully detached for about a week, which is all to the good.
Yes, absolutely. Hang on, where are you going? Are
I
you leaving us? Hang on.
I did come back. I came back. I've updated my headset. I have read down, I think, through the Slack. Um, I'm probably up to date. I saw that Andrew has posted something new.
Yeah, it's linked as well now. The so we now have a new series of recordings that I put into a PDF with Claude summary.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely astounding. I mean, it's not rocket science, it's simple stuff.
I
But
saw the overview. I saw the overview you posted. I mean, I don't know. The thing is, I can't remember that deeply. I mean, the thing I find hard about it is it's so anodyinely sort of it's sort of smooth, but it's so generic. I don't know if that's actually really the true reflection or not. I mean, it reads as perfectly good English. Whether it's accurate or not, I have no
what
idea.
that's the whole point of the PDF. So I sent it out to everyone. So if you, after every meeting, I will update it, new document,
Mhm.
and maybe even Wednesday meetings because they're a bit different. I will see. We'll all have to agree or not. The point is, if you see something not reflecting what you saw happen, tell me. You know, this doesn't have to be pure AI. I'm very, very happy to edit it. For instance, Fabien's last name is variously misspelled for some reason.
Mhm.
But what I found quite shocking was the summary of all the meetings. And it said, yes, the team has progressed in this and that way. And I found that was completely correct. That was a bit beyond.
I suppose what I'm saying, and perhaps, and I don't mean this over cynically, is that I think I could have written that without possibly attending the meetings, in the sense that it's so generic
No,
that
it's not, though. Hang on a second. Hang on, because it says things like shifting from broad discussion to implementation details, the technical challenges in XR, right?
yeah, that's what I mean. It's actually uh, it's sort of. I was just reminded of this. Of something I was reading about this problem summarization is that I mean the difficulty is that it too readily gets jammed into a sense of whether one likes or doesn't. And I think that's the wrong look at it. I was just thinking on the fact that what's hard to do is unless you're actually really taking quite detailed notes or reviewing the whole thing again, actually remembering.
Yeah,
I
but
find just let me finish a second. I find the very generic summaries not actually very informative because they're so generic that I don't actually know. It doesn't really tell me anything.
I understand that perspective, but I don't think that that's generic because it depends on what we ask it to do, right? So what I've done here is going to paste this in because this is quite central to our work as well. 1 second. It's so annoying that the chat window is hidden if the window isn't huge. Right, so in the chat now, I've pasted in the prompts. Oh, it was too long. 1 second. Right, so this is the first part of the prompt, kind of the intro. But what was kind of, I think, amazing is that, what the hell? Sorry, it's just Zoom not liking. Yeah, what I find kind of amazing is that I can do these multiple tasks in one go. And that saves me, obviously, a ton of time. But I also find it interesting that, um, for instance, what was discussed regarding visual meta? A couple of times it said there wasn't really any discussion on visual meta in this meeting. That in itself is useful. I
Well,
also,
is that your recollection? Again,
no,
don't mistake this as a
Mark,
sort of as
I
a
have the
judgment.
transcript. I have the transcript.
Yeah.
It's based on the transcript, so I can search the transcript. And we had the video. So but that's what I'm saying. If each one of us, if we feel something was missing or something is wrong, from your memory or from your notes, just tell me and I'll edit it in. So far, from my memory, yes.
Okay, that's what I mean, the point is, because otherwise, if we're having to go back and mark something that's being done for us automatically, it's not really being done automatically because we're having to do the work twice over. That's really what I was driving at.
Yeah, no, I know you have a different level of enthusiasm, but I mean,
No, you see that misrepresents it. It's not. I just have reasonable doubt over accuracy because I do understand that unintentionally it's doing something that sort of tricks us. So if we get something that's very readable, we tend to assume it's sort of correct because we're looking for errors. And the thing is, if it's well confected, we slide right past the things we half remember.
okay.
And none of this particularly matters.
But Mark, I don't agree because if you look at the most recent meeting, for instance, right? First thing, it lists who was there. That's a simple thing, and it's easy, and it's done nicely. General summary may be good or not, but then we discussed a year or two ago using the word important and so on. It does a pretty good sentiment analysis, I think, for these. Pretty good. And if someone feels different, I'll change it. But what is really interesting is if you look down here, for instance, the names mentioned, that is really useful for the future to remember what sessions Bill Buxton was mentioned in. So he's not here as a keyword, he's here as a name. And, we did not discuss this. We discussed time on the,
Yeah.
what we discussed on these, because of what I think is quite amazing, being able to do this, have all these different prompts in one. And what I would really like is if you or anyone else has an idea for a different prompt to kind of optimize this, or even to test the system, I would love to add it. Because the whole, yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I was wondering, is it integrating the chat bar transcript or not?
No, it's not. I have thought about that, and in the last meeting, because we're supposed to be posting.
Because I tend to feed a lot into the side chat. It doesn't necessarily come out in audio, so I think it's missing a fair amount of input.
Right. Okay. So I think that's an absolutely valid point. Hang on a second. The second, this is for the prompt.
Said the
Yes.
cream of the social thingy.
We're in a meeting.
Mhm.
At least say hi if you're going to interrupt.
By then see
Excellent. Can I continue my work now, please, beautiful man? Okay. Right. Thank you, Peter. That's absolutely valid. Thank you for the wave as well. Absolutely valid criticism. What I'll do from now on, I will paste in the chat transcript at the end of it. And
Perfect. That should fix it. Very good.
And I've also explicitly said here, take that into account. Yeah, that was definitely missing. Any other comments on this? Have you guys had a chance to look at the PDF? I just think it's so cool. I mean, last meeting we did discuss uploading. That was a big thing. I think it's incredible. Okay, anyway, that was that. We do have an agenda today, as is here. Dini's not here, so we're not going to do use cases. The vast majority of discussion today will be the work that Andrew is doing, and Adam is now looking to have more time to join us. Adam will be doing three things. He will be assisting Andrew further at Andrew's requests. He will help make sure that we really optimize our uploading procedure, because Andrew has done work there, and to my great annoyance, and I say this with respect, both Fabian and Brandl are like, oh, it's really easy. Well, let's do it then. So Adam agrees that. He also says, oh, it's really easy, but he's very happy to support you, Andrew, make sure there's nothing there. What we discussed on Monday is probably the way we're going to go. you've probably done 99% of the work. And finally, Adam is also going to do his independent stuff based on the same data. So what we talked about briefly this morning was that when we click on the link to our things, and we now have the one sphere, if when we get to, let's say, September in Poland, let's say Andrew has 2 different things, there'll be 2 spheres. If Adam has done 3 things, there'll be 5 spheres. So it'll be spheres in a circle. You can click which experience you're going into. So that's kind of fun. So it means we can have a variety of experiences based on the same thing, and we have a unified entrance mechanism. That sounds cool, doesn't it? And then, Andrew, you're happy with that, right?
Just one clarification. Are those 5 spheres on the same web page that all load into their own experiences, or is this like there's a landing page with the 5 spheres and they link out to the experiences?
To be decided.
Okay.
If we get closer to the dates, I think for now, it's just going to be one sphere. And if Adam does something different, he will do sphere in his own thing. And then we
Yeah.
will decide later on, you guys will decide on the level of effort involved.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to stack multiple experiences in one page because you'd have a lot of redundant code. But it would make sense to have a landing page styled with the spheres, and each sphere links to the experience. And you'd have a sphere on that page. So it would be very consistent, and it would work really well. I like your theming.
I agree with everything you said. So just following, going through the announcement bits a little bit on vision development. It's going to sound like a huge detour. It isn't. I have written an email to Apple saying, please fix this, that, and the other on the Vision Pro. And I sent it to Adam just to see if he had anything to add. Obviously, unfortunately, he hasn't had a Vision Pro to use yet, but just in general terms. And one of my things that I wrote is, oh, we can't spawn more than one window. That's completely wrong. You can spawn more than one window. So that changed the vocabulary. And before I get to this, there's another vocabulary thing that Adam brought up, which I think is very important. And I think I'm going to get a big smile from Mark. Libraries, what is it? The thing in the JSON is not a library, according to Adam, and I think he is right. It is a catalog because it doesn't actually contain the data. So I think we should change our language we have catalog.json, and then we have other mechanism to actually upload individual documents where available. Does that sound right? Okay, cool. That relates to the question here. First of all, on a philosophical note, as I talked about the other day when Mark was off in the wilderness, Mark pointed out when I did the map in Author years ago that, hang on, I'm just going to open it for the sake of discussion, this map here, that it may possibly be most useful at the beginning of a project or maybe at the end. It may not be useful during the project work. I think that was a very important insight because, and I don't know why it happened so strongly to me, but who here has seen the final episode of Shogun? Only Adam. Okay, so we have one cultured person amongst us. Fine. You have to watch it. It's the best television in decades. Anyway, at the end, there's this scene where you have this big bad guy, samurai warrior, and he has to write something. And he writes on a piece of paper that is maybe 3 A4 sheets wide, roughly. And it just really struck me that a human scale for reading and writing probably is the size of an open large book, roughly, give or take. Because beyond that, we have to move our head a lot, not just our eyes, right? How does that fit in with using the whole page? And of course, there is a reason why a murder wall is a wall. That's because of when we read and write, it needs to be in a focused card size space. But when we think, that's when we need more space. So it seems to be reiterating what many people have said. It just clarified for me that there's a difference between reading and writing and thinking. It's blurred, it's not black and white. But what that means is when Adam pointed out my complete mistake with the window thing, I just forgot it was possible. It's just a feature in Author, but I think it's relevant for our discussion in a big way. Currently, in Author, we have this thing I call folding, so it folds into an outline, right? On iOS, though, I've called it outline, not folding. And I've been going back and forth with the terminology. And here's the thing I really want us to discuss, and that is, until today, the idea was that whether you're on iOS, Vision, or Mac, you fold, and instead of just getting this, you also get a list here at the bottom for other views. For instance, to see names like this, keywords, defined terms, all these different things that uses the heading, the outline, right? But I still called it outline on iOS. And I wanted to put it back to fold. Sorry for making a confusing thing here, but what I realized is that if this button results in a new window on the side in Vision, it's not folding, is it? If you make a new thing on the side, it's not a folding, it's the wrong action. So we, in terms of our own vocabulary, we should probably call it an outline, shouldn't we? What do you guys think?
What do you mean by a new? I mean, sorry. When you say a new window, what is the content of the new window? Is it a folded view of the existing view?
I'll show you. That's the perfect question. So
I'd be inclined to call it a view or a perspective.
yeah, that makes sense. But the thing is, I messed up a little bit here. So on Vision OS now, what will happen is you have this window on the left, writing away, and you tap outline. Instead of something happening on the same space as it does in iOS and Mac, this new window appears on the side. That window shows all the headings in the document. You can tap on them with this main view to jump to that section, right?
So, so there are only ever two windows. That's not presupposing they can't be. What I'm trying to understand is, so essentially, the button, for want of a better word, in the bottom right is like a plus that opens a new window. But I think you're doing something more specific than that. You're not just opening a new window, you're opening a specific new window of a fixed view type. So basically, the button bottom right is a show hide toggle for a folded view of the current document. The thought behind the question is that I think the issue about fold and outline is interesting, because another thing I've tripped across recently was a sort of completely pointless argument between two non-meeting sets of minds about people who expected an outline to work within the current text of the document, as opposed to people who were looking at the text of an outline. And whilst that's only a thing of scope, it does bring home this thing that the outline is very structural. The fold is actually quite a nuance and an enhancement. So if you understand what's going on, they are one and the same. If you don't, it might be confusing, because if you don't understand what the folding is doing, you're expected to see the outline, and you would expect to see all the elements of the outline at whatever scope you've given it, down to a level, whatever, is expected. I think the fold is more subtle than that, because it doesn't necessarily show headings for which there is no pertinent content within the folds question. Is that correct? Kind of.
The new thing would be all these things at the bottom of the screen in the folded view. Because as you know, Mark, in Author, you can view only names, glossary, all of that stuff, right? That should be defined. Thank you. So when it's bold for headings, it'll only show headings. If I now tap on highlights, it'll show any highlighted text plus the headings above only those. So all these views get in here. Now, the way it works in iOS right now is, see that? So that button that's hard to see, it was outlined. I tap, so I now can jump around the document by that. So it becomes, and then I can hide the outline again.
Okay.
So the reason I'm involving you guys in this particular issue is that because in Vision, these are 2 floating windows, and there can be many more. I hope to have the map and all of that stuff as individual floating windows. Doesn't it make sense that this button to spawn this thing with headings plus should be called outline rather than fold? It makes more sense, right? Okay. I just find it useful sometimes to go through some of these definitions. Okay, so yeah, Peter.
Yeah, do you think maybe it would help if there was like a little mini icon next to a button that's going to be spawning a new window? So that people could just see from the icon that if I click this button, it's going to be creating a new spatial window, whereas this other button would be doing something in the window that I'm in. And because it doesn't have that little icon next to it, I know that it's just a local command versus a creating a new space command.
No, and there's a reason for that. I've thought about this type of thing a lot. I used to spend a ton of time wondering what's the difference between an internal link on a page versus external. So I absolutely agree with your questioning. The reason I don't think we should do that in this case is because at some point soon, you should be able to choose something like a long press spawns a new window, a quick press uses the same window. And this is why I'm also taking Andrew's time with this, because it's the notion of over time, the user should be able to determine whether they're reforming their current view versus spawning further views in addition.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so, but thank you for the question. That was a really important question. And this is the kind of thinking that I'm going through, because the email that I'm sending to Apple, I'll probably share it with you guys before I send it actually, because it is, it's intended for a few things. There's a few bugs that I want to fix, obviously, but also I want to strengthen our relationship with the Vision team at Apple now that both Brandel and Bruce Horn is in that team. So I'll send it to you guys before I send it. If you have any thoughts, basically I want to say subtly, the Vision isn't selling very much. We're working on making it a better working environment. Help us. That's the thing. Okay, and then on the agenda here, we have potential design day, more Europe-friendly time. No point discussing that today, but when Adam is out of the woods with dealing with family things, Adam, you'll suggest a day that and a time that works better for you, right? Yeah, I'm seeing you nodding. That's good. So we'll get back to that. And Andrew, that'll probably be while you Americans are asleep. It'll be very high level. It will be recorded, but if there's something is of relevance to you, then we will send it. It'll probably just be us having fun. And then we're looking at Future of Tech Social. We're going to have to figure out some more timing on that. We'll be dealing with that in the Slack and in the Twitter thing. It's getting complicated. And then the question is, any other announcements? Come on, guys. Mark, you want to talk about the joy of not being digital for a while?
No, apart from it was very relaxing. So I deliberately didn't. I did still sample news, but essentially I've had a week offline and just walking mainly. It was extremely useful. Time for reflection.
That's good. I'm just adding add notes to transcript, just so I don't forget, Peter. One more thing before we jump in here. Yeah, so for the Vision stuff, just to spur your thoughts, maybe you have something to add to it. On Quest, you can choose to have a pass-through just for your keyboard. You can't do that on the Mac. Oh, excuse me, on Vision yet. So you have to have half an environment, which is not ideal. They should fix that. There are some issues with the keyboard, which is bizarre. Most of these are just kind of bugs. They haven't polished the software. The software very much. If you are in Author and you select text using your eyes and dragging, you get an iOS style contextual menu. If you use a trackpad and select, you get a Mac OS vertical menu. Right. The iOS one iOS style isn't very wide. We managed to make it finally on the iPad. We managed to make it fit the screen so you can easily tap. On the iPhone, it's ridiculous, of course. But these are things they haven't done for the Vision yet. And then, of course, in addition to having more windows open, which Adam has showed me how we can do, we need more control over that. So they don't just open up here or there. And then we have further issues. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. Andrew, are you ready? Oh, hang on,
Sure.
one more thing. I'm so sorry. One more thing on the agenda.
Okay.
This is 5 seconds. Hang on, I'm just going to copy some links for you. We need to start inviting people soon. Please have a look at the invitation. Please have a look at the invitation list. And if you have someone, just email me and I'll add it to the list, okay? We really need to get further. We'll have a little icon and logo and everything. That's it. Sorry. Please go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. I don't know how many people have seen the change log. There's a whole bunch of like really little things that have been done. So I'm not going to go through all of those. But for main relevance, we now have a snap focus distance to see how that works. So you can select any of the text objects. In this case, it's still just citations. But this next week I'm working on more. And you can focus it so it snaps up close, adds a background, and scales it down so it's more comfortable. And if you load in a document from the library or catalog, I guess we're calling it now, that will autofocus by default. You can only have one thing focus at a time, and it's got a little animation that transitions between it. So that's the main thing that's been tested this week. Like I said, lots of like little changes as well. So you may notice other little ease of use stuff. And yeah, and if anyone cares about that, it's listed in the updates.
Immediate question.
Yes.
Upload choose file has been moved top left, but it seems like I have to do it now rather than
No, you just haven't loaded the page properly, I'm thinking. It shouldn't be top left unless the CSS failed to load.
it's not loading beyond that.
Okay, let me take a look. It was
Okay.
running last night for me.
Yeah, I had the same issue right now, a moment
Okay.
ago.
Something's probably broken then.
Yeah, I think I basically it's not finding the files.
Yeah, it's failing to find yeah, I see it's failed to find the CSS. Let me go take a look. Sometimes NPM gives it the wrong URL to the assets, and I know how to fix that really quick. But it may have overridden that. 1 second.
This is so bizarre. I've taken the virtual Mac display and overlaid it exactly on the normal monitor. Use of tech.
Okay, try reloading the page. See if that does something.
Yes. Andrew. Okay, I want everyone else to make a big sound when you see what he's done. When it loads for you. Rob, you're gonna love this. Mark, can you see it? Adam, can you see it?
I'm into the. I've gone through the start with our little lines going on it, and I'm now into the display. But
How cool is it with the lines going through it?
yeah, neat.
I'll show you why it's super neat. A special reason. So our invitation, which there's a link to in our chat, just put it again. Where is the agenda? Good question. Sorry. Usually I put it in the chat. It's on Basecamp. Post this doc. Oh yeah, it wasn't posted. I'm sorry. We're still drafts. Posting now. Yeah, this is really impressive, Andrew. Just these little animations makes me very happy.
They look kind of cool as the menu. They look less cool inside the library, so I have some plans on how to make that better in the future. But for now, this was all I could fit in.
I think because of your brilliance here, when you look at a document, it shouldn't be there. I agree, it doesn't work in the background. However, when you long press the sphere, then it's okay. And I see you've all also got them on the little sphere. Andrew, this is so cool.
One thing, Andrew, I just reflection. Wandering through the thing, I found myself on the menu bar, click the export, and because I hadn't previously allowed the site to download things, I ended up with outside, basically back in the pass-through mode. It asked to do a download, which I clicked on, but I then had to reopen the browser window to accept a download. Minor implementation stuff. The relevant part being that it was a bit odd that I appeared to be dumped out of the simulation for no good reason.
Yeah, that's just how the OS handles the browser
Yeah,
if you don't have an
I
application
totally
enabled.
understand.
I wish it wasn't that rough. I've gone and enabled it for the URL on mine and then it works, but perhaps we should have some little information tab, or we could try when you first load the page, maybe to download like a dummy file
Mhm.
that prompts the user to enable these things right away.
Yeah. And I've one more quick question. Sorry, because I can't see everybody else, but you can probably see from where my hands are. I'm trying to interact with the reading distance control.
Have you tried touching it?
Yeah.
That
no,
one's actually touch based. Everything else is remote.
I had
Yeah,
to use the
that's
other hand. Okay, cool.
yeah, so that's the thing. That menu was made a long time ago, and we've since
Yeah.
changed a lot of design principles.
Mhm.
So that it is due for a redesign for sure.
No, I now understand. Not that it appears to be changing anything. I can move the slider for reading distance.
Oh, it does change, but it doesn't change the focused text. So if you have a white background around the text, it doesn't. That's where I got confused.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I want to get that changed too. I'm thinking of adding two different slider dots to the menu. So one for focus, one for um, the other layer. And of course, they couldn't pass each other. But since we already want to redesign the menu at some point, I'm not sure if that's a priority or not.
So I have a question here. I'm very happy with this. So I'm now saying white background focused reference list, right? But from what we have now, is it possible to interact with a piece to see an abstract or something in this view?
No abstract yet. Um, I I put that dev time towards the orange lines, unfortunately. But this week
I
I'm going to
just
be
thought we
working on
had it.
abstract and
But
what
I
was that?
thought I saw it when I first came into this environment. I thought I saw it.
Yeah, the abstract still sits in the library or
Ah,
catalog
right.
page.
Okay.
It doesn't load in as a separate piece yet. But yeah, this next week I'm going to be working on loading a lot more stuff from the document. So that's my priority. And Mark, since you mentioned the save load, it is worth pointing out, just like last week, I don't have the save load system yet working for the new implementation. So I fixed last week's save load system, and then I ran out of time to implement this week's. So the focus stuff doesn't save properly. You'll probably crash the software if you try to export and then load in one of those.
Okay, so no problem. And I've now got the hang of it. The one bit I'm just trying to work out is when I go into the current demo you got uploaded, it starts with the grey background thing on the right, and then I do something and it goes to the white background, which is fine. Am I supposed to be able to toggle between those two? So
Yeah, that's the long press on your wrist.
I'll give that a try then. Okay.
That's to load in multiple documents from the catalog you've imported. It has one by default, but it'll change.
So Andrew, many questions. One of them is, it seems to me now, by my eyes, that the text is more not good. It's hard to explain, but it kind of looks more pixelated. Is it a different rendering mechanism, or is it just that you've changed it to the point where I actually notice?
Are you talking like the focus compared to everything else, or are you just saying in general it looks worse? Because I
In
didn't
gen-
change anything there.
In general, it looks worse. The focus looks less worse.
That's strange. Yeah,
But
I
I-
didn't change the rendering system at all.
But I am on this headset. I'm wondering if it's different in the Quest with this type of text rendering.
No, it's the same text renderer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why it would be different this week as opposed. You didn't notice it like last week or anything like that. It's just started now.
I think it's quite simply that everything is better now, so I'm more critical. It may very well be that.
Okay, yeah, maybe the focus is just sharper, so everything else in contrast looks worse. I'm a little bit unsure.
So in terms of notes, and everyone else, if you disagree with any of this, please do say. I think the background should be a touch darker in the environment, especially in the library. It is darker. I think the library darkness should be in the reading, and the library should be just a little bit darker.
Yeah, we can do that. That's an easy adjustment. We can see how that looks.
Okay.
Can I load from the grey? So from the library. Right. I've done it. Thank you. Sorry, answer my own question. So if I pinch the library item, it loads into the main display space.
What? Oh, yeah. This is crazy, actually.
So Andrea, let me put this as a thought, because rather than feeling on subject, it's really nice now seeing the document. So I've loaded a document. I see a citation. I'm seeing a very, very long, depending on the length of the citation given, which says to me we're probably showing more information than we need, because in the first instance, probably what you need to know is the authors, however they're listed for that. So in this case, it's up to 4 authors, or it's blogs et al. The title, and then possibly for things that have it a DOI or a DOI URL or a URL if they have them. In other words, if it's got some link that we might want to, even if not now, use, in other words, something we might want to interact with. But otherwise, I suspect most of the extra information might better be essentially elided for the first display. it will just give you perhaps it will give us a slightly tighter information display.
Are
Does that make sense?
Sort of. Are you talking about the citations, or are you talking
Yeah, the
about the
citation. So
library? The
in
citations.
exactly as it were the white view when you've loaded it.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
it's got just everything that's there, just pasted in. It didn't care about what's there. It didn't trim anything. If you have sort of a format you want me to follow on what we can just erase
mhm.
or something like that, then absolutely. Yeah, I'd be happy to make changes to that. It's
Yeah.
quite obnoxious to look at sometimes when they have like a massive URL that you can't do anything with and it just stretches off.
Well, that's another interesting thing. Is it's the balance of those subdivisions where you want something that isn't too, as you might put it, too obnoxious visually. I know something you can absorb. So in the first instance, okay, so there's a link there, and it's a link that's too long to show. Fine, okay, and then I might want to have a secondary interaction to see the hell of it, because actually I do need to see the hell of it. Otherwise, I might just need to know that, oh, there's a URL I can follow here. And I take it that as long as you've got something like a JSON or a BibTeX underlying the per citation information, then obviously you can get access to those individual bits. Because if
I
someone
think
said
you're
to
correct,
you,
yeah.
can I have the author's date? This is probably author, year, and title, the primary things that generally would be the most useful to surface. But I'm thinking of it, for instance, that this is another interesting thing. So as we get the documents from an ordinary PDF, we don't have that. If we have a document with PDF with Visual Meta, we do. Or if you have something like a JSON or BibTeX, you likely do have that granularity. So this is an interesting thing going forward. In other words, our legacy publishing styles actually aren't that helpful to us. Fred.
Yeah, on this, we're making an assumption that we have perfect metadata because this is a proof of concept, and you are the one who has provided this perfect metadata. So we are making the assumption, and we had a big discussion over the last 2 weeks where Dini rightly was defending the need for PDF looking documents. So what we are doing now is trying to use HTML versions, which are available from ACM currently, but rendering them to look PDF-ish with the added level of interactive, because I do love PDF for some uses, but certainly not in XR. So that's what we're going to try to do. That means we can have snippets and so on. Also, the kind of views and limitations you're talking about, Mark, is something I would really like you to write down, because you are an expert in that area of what would be useful to see. And furthermore, since we have both Mark and Adam, if you can all please click on this last link that I put in, the chatty chat. And for you, who was, have you seen this before, Andrew? So the quote,
Maybe it's trying to load in.
okay. Please tell me when you got it.
Okay, it's here now. This does not look familiar, so I guess I have not seen it.
So with the risk of Mark and Adam coded this, Mark provided the metadata. But so you can see something with a white background with lots of columns on top, right? Andrew, yes? Oh, okay, so I couldn't see your face, right? Please hit the tab key on your keyboard. And please select anything. So what dynamically happens here is that, sorry, I just tapped myself. It's probably obvious, but that document, you now see more of it. On the left, you see everything it cites, its reference section. On the right, you see all the documents in our known system which references it. So I think we're at the point now where in our library, we can start doing this kind of view. I'll ask everybody what they think. Okay, well, I was going to ask Mark first, but with that nodding, I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is really interesting, and we'll have to work out, what document format sort of data. But I absolutely, in short, yes, I think this is something that lends itself to the XR space. very much and is a really, I think, a really useful way to explore things. Certainly, it's interesting that when I show people these views, it's something that most people actually get, and there is a sort of sense of, well, why can't I do this now? In other words, why isn't this sort of a way to do it? I can see all the background reasons to it, but what that says to me is it's pushing slightly on an open door in terms of the style of presentation is useful. I think the white view is the one that seems to have the most instant sort of sense of people getting it. But the other interesting thing is people really like the idea of basically changing the view spec, the tab through to something else. And once they understand what that's allowing them to do, again, I've been remarkably surprised at how little sort of pushback there's been. I've certainly never shown it to anyone who said, I don't understand what it is and I never use it, which of itself is interesting.
So, yes, on all points. I'm leaning towards the beige design because I did that one. However, okay, I'm sitting now in perfect space. I'm going to go back into VR because now we're at the point of really discussing this. So I'm now in our library. I see documents on the left. I see abstracts on the right. Absolutely brilliant. Nothing happens if I have my flat hand. I do a pointing thing, and then I get the laser thing. And the laser thing kind of goes away after a while. I have the little dot, which is absolutely great. This, to me, is perfect. If anyone disagrees, that's fine. I'm now tapping on one. And then all it opens now, and please, Andrew, I can't see your face, of course. So if I'm saying something wrong, please do tell. I believe what I'm saying is the reference section from the document I tapped on. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it's doing. It's just showing it can load content.
Yeah.
And like I said, this week we're trying to load in actual document content rather than just the citation.
Yeah, and then I tapped on one reference and I do find a document and it shows up in the background in the most horrible way, which is absolutely fine because we're now working on the whole focus thing. So what I'm going to do now is try to unfocus. Focus. By the way, please tell me, guys, if you agree. When I point to the margin that expands to be great for interaction, that is what should spawn the menu to allow me to do unfocus and close instead of on individual text items. Do you agree with me?
On selecting what? I was writing a note.
What I think I mean is that I'm in the focused mode. I have reference section here. When I select an item, I get a pop-up menu. What I would like to keep there is detach from group, clone from group, find in document, mark this text, and close, just to close the window.
Right, and move the focus somewhere else. But where did you want to put it instead?
I think that the moving bar on the left or something like that should produce that because it's an action that is for this whole rectangle rather than one item.
Okay, I see how that would make sense if you had like a mouse with left and right click. But considering we only have one button, which is select, how would we do that? Because it would just pop up every time you try to drag.
That's a good point. Hang on. I'm just trying to, I made a mess there in the corner with a few pulled out items. So the items that you pulled out, this show in text, they obviously will need a focus option too, right?
Yeah, and I think what I'll need to do is if you try to find in text a document that's focused, it should autofocus that as well and not replace the currently focused text.
All right, so this is what I want you to do. And please tell me, anyone, if you disagree, as always. In the pop-up menu, there is space between the title, the commands, and a space between before close, right? I think we need to design this menu a little bit better so that the focus is separate. So guys, I'm asking all of you now, the button in the pop-up menu that closes the pop-up menu that's currently called close. Should that maybe be a X top left-hand corner or something?
So taking one step back, I would still argue against the context menu.
Okay.
To me, it makes much more. First thing is that I trigger it all the time when working.
Yes.
So
good point.
it pops up all the time when kind of clicking at items. So it really hides. So it gets in the way all the time. I want to punch this little menu sometimes, but that is a problem with context menus, and most of them detach from group. It's a bit unclear when you would like to do the detach from group. Most often you have a list and you pull things out. What would a use case be to actually remove an item from this kind of list, a fixed known reference list? Cloning it, I see, that's obvious. You want to keep it in a separate collection. So if we look at all of them, let's say detach is not that relevant. Clone from group could be an arrow next to the next to an item on the left hand side. Find a document could also be kind of an icon or the word find next to the item. So if you click it in place, it's next to the item and not on top of it. Mark this text could actually be the four color, because there is a sub menu, I guess, for under mark this text. So it's kind of clunky to go into several layers to get to mark an item. I would say that what if you had 5 dots or 3 dots of color on the right hand side of an item, you could just press it immediately, or have a kind of a marker sub menu on the right hand side. So and if you do that, and focus would perhaps be better to have on either on your wrist or on the focus area. If there is a focus area, kind of a close reading area, that you point to it and then you get it there. That would also be quite natural. So when I say this, the thing is that the whole menu would disappear and you wouldn't need a close button because there is no menu. The menu is spread out as actions in the next to the items. And many systems are designed like that, where you have kind of the sub actions appearing in proximity to the list, as small either icons or word like action buttons. But the good thing about that is that it would be much less modal. You don't have a big pop-up in your face. You have small actions that lead out from each item, and it could be added to quite easily without exploding or like building up a big menu that is in the way. And that would also make it more user-friendly in that you don't get the pop-up in front of the items covering most of the so I would argue against the context menu, perhaps for long press actions where if you really want to delete or export or do something a bit more involved in or destructive actions or seldom used actions, it could be used to have a. But if you want to detach something, I would just point at it and drag it out to the side. I wouldn't even have a clone button. I would hold, drag out.
That was a lot of words, and I agree, but let's try to see what that actually would be. Should I do it in Keynote and you kind of dictate to me? Or should we do it differently? Because I agree in principle, but I think we should design it. Is that cool? Good time to do now?
First, I think it's good to have the discussion before we design, so we don't jump into something suboptimal or.
I agree, but let's have a look at just a few conceptual rough things, right? So let's pretend this is the library and you select something. What should happen when you select something? Should you see the abstract like we have now, do you think? Obviously asking everybody. I just want to try a few rough realities, so to speak.
Are you talking when you first load in from the
Okay,
library menu?
so I discussed the step one step further down. Could we do that one first, perhaps? Or else we will do. Now you're stepping into a different interaction that is also important to design more.
I agree, but let me just okay, so boom, here is a piece of okay, so this piece of text could be a reference section, it could be the abstract, it could be any part of the document, right?
Yep.
And now we want to do things to it. So currently we have I'm just going to write it out. So we make sure we don't lose out any functions. We have a context menu. This is so cool. I can see it over here. So detach. Come on.
So a comment on the detach. What was the thinking of detach? Was there a reason for it, or was it just a test thing?
Please take this, Andrew, while I keep writing.
I don't remember who suggested it. Everything in the pop-up menu was added because somebody asked for it.
Yep.
So I don't remember who was
And,
which one.
Yeah, not necessarily who, but what was the kind of thinking? Do we remember that? Well, why we have the detach? I'm sure there are situations where you would like to kind of drag out and remove things from a list. If you have two lists, you may want to move one item to another, kind of drag and drop.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I think it was just kind of a natural progression for the let's explode the document idea.
Mm.
So it's like, well, let's break everything into as many pieces as we can.
Okay.
It was added when we first added the pop-up menu, which was months ago now. So I'm not quite sure.
So
I don't remember all the context for it.
Yeah,
So-
it may make more sense in other contexts than reference lists, for example. I think cloning and copying is the most important action, and that could be just a drag, pinch, drag out to the position you want to have it. So you have one fluid motion instead of press, clone, get a clone, and then position it. It's that's 3 or 4 actions instead of having pinch and drag would be
Are you
a bit more.
suggesting removing the handle and just having dragging the text itself pulls it apart?
And for dragging things out from a list, I'm suggesting that, yes. So pinch and drag would be a new action, a new gesture, a universal gesture for lists or things that could be dragged. So if you have a list, if you pinch and if you don't release the pinch immediately, you could drag it out and get a copy to your collection. What would be an equivalent in Touchland?
Forgive me, I'm if I'm forgetting. What is group in this context? On the context menu.
Well, so that was when you had a lot of references, and if you detached one and then you had another. Well, I'm just putting this as a rough note. I think we should kind of forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of start fresh. And I'm not doing any design here, but let's say we have a piece of text and we are now not in the library, and you should be able to do things with it. So one thing you should be able to do is close it, right? Oops, that's not what I wanted.
Close it in the sense of is this close and set focus back to where you were, or is this just closing effectively what is a secondary window? I asked the question with sort of backstory to it, but I'm just trying to think. Well, so part of the relevance is that if I'm looking at effectively a small window of text, a particular point of focus, I would have got there from someone else. So in essence, is the close going back to where I was, or is just saying I no longer wish to have this bit of display present?
The question is what you want it to be. Let's.
No, indeed, but I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is close sort of potentially implies two different things.
Yes, so it could mean close the pop-up menu or close this piece of text. I
Yeah.
have now, for the sake of what Adam was saying, I'm not doing icons or anything, but what I've done now is just a rough idea of underneath whatever thing this is, we have a couple of options. So they don't go away. Maybe they're not always strong. You have to point to them to really see them. But these are the key things we want, maybe, right?
One
Yeah,
thing that
wh-
I could point out if we're trying to trim, close could probably be removed. The pop-up menu could just go away by pointing and selecting at nothing. So
Yeah,
that might take care of that option.
yeah, that would be very, very nice. So, Adam, you can see what I'm doing as well, right?
And not really, because I'm in the headset
Okay.
and
No,
thinking.
I'm just saying that for simplicity, without using icons, what if we had at the bottom of every window, there is this grayed out thing, and then you point to it, and then you get these options that we will decide. Find and document is only relevant. Yeah, some of them would be context sensitive, obviously, would only be relevant if this was a reference. Mark in text would, give you the option to color this thing. Focus or defocus or unfocus or whatever it is will be toggled here. And then this will be to close this window. Not because there wouldn't be a pop-up, we'll just do this.
Yeah, I see a potential issue. This only is designed for focus, right? So this would only work if you have it focused.
Yeah.
How would this work for pieces of text in general?
So that one of the things I said in the intro today is my personal thing of when we actually dealing with reading text, we probably want it in focus, and we should probably allow the user to have more than one focus. So let's say you have 3 or 4 of these up here. That should be allowed.
I thought the point of focus was to only have one.
I thought so too. But now that I'm sitting here with my headset on, having your thing over there and having other thing, I'm thinking a bit differently. And I'm just spitballing here, to use that expression.
Okay. The
Yeah,
thing
so
So
is,
we have. It sounds like we sort of have two slightly overlapping meanings of focus, which I think I
Yes,
get,
yes.
but are separate. So there's, in terms of having multiple things in focus, what you're really, in a sense, these are foregrounding things. So there are things within your visual exploration space that you want, in essence, closer to you, perhaps in better focus or in more detail, as opposed to the thing that actually has input focus, which may or may not necessarily need to be explicit, dependent on the quality of the tracking. As time goes forward, that may go away. For now, it might be that you might have, say, 4 things essentially foregrounded, but we might need to know which of them has the focus, simply so that there's clarity for the software as it exists at the moment to know what's going on. Because obviously, if it can't guess what you're trying to interact with, it's useful if there is at least an explicit way of saying, no, this particular text window is the one that I'm working with at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. So there's 2 definitions of what focus would be, and that's why I've added the term framed now. Frame just means have this white background. Focus will go to exactly what we talked about, meaning front and center.
I'm not sure focus is useful for that. That's not, I must say, it doesn't. I find myself having to ask what it means. Focus to me either means it's in focus, like I can read it, or it has input. Basically, it is the input locus. Otherwise,
Right.
I'm not sure the term.
You're right, but what we mean is front and center with a background in a comfortable reading position for your primary reading space.
Sure. So what I'm suggesting, therefore, is probably focus isn't the word for that use. We need to.
Oh, I agree. So what do
Yeah,
we
sure.
think might work better?
Except that, well, if it wasn't such a long word, I'd say foreground, because essentially what you're doing is you're saying you want these to the front, you want these more present, closer to you than other things. So there are other things you want in your display space. You want to know that they're there. You don't want them out of the space,
I
But
don't
then
have a problem with foreground, Mark. I don't think that's bad at all. What do the rest of you think? I think that's quite nice.
Doesn't work well for a verb, but doesn't need to be.
Two foreground, yeah.
Okay.
And I got battery warning for the Vision, so there we go. That's life. Battery.
So the alternative to that could be that the different reading distances are clearly visualized in another way. So you just say where you want it, wall, close distance, so they are visually apparent, and that perhaps the icons or something, or the action is so clear that we don't need to call it focus or foreground either, because it's just sending it to a visual place or a visual an icon or an action that they represent what we want.
So on that,
yeah.
Yeah, no, please.
But I don't think that's that can be experimented with if it's an icon or not. But it should be clear from not just from the text, but also from some supporting visuals where the different layers are, kind of the back layer, a wall, or the three different distances, if we have three of them.
I think it's difficult at this stage because we have the classic chicken and egg problem. Is so how many layers or distances do you need? Well, the answer is you don't know till you've tried, and Murphy's law means the one you first chose isn't ideal. But essentially, as I understand, we have two at the moment. We have the general background display, the things we put into the display area, and there are things at the moment only one item which we've chosen to sort of foreground. Though, as Fred's raised, we might, as we go forward, possibly be looking to more. And one reason you might want to effectively put them away out of the foreground is you just pull too many things to the front, which is something easily done when you have an exploratory interface, because you keep pulling. It's like pulling more books off the shelf until you've got a table full of books and empty shelves, and you actually need to start putting some back because you just can't find stuff.
So there could be just an arrow front or back that sends it to the front row or back row. What we call wall or reading distance other times. So front and back would be
What's interesting there is, I think, and it's something that got raised before, is that in effectively in the learner mode, you actually need to understand, text helps because it's sort of more explicit. But probably once the user is experienced, things will either be sort of almost contextual to what you're doing, or might be reduced to a symbol just to give you a target to point at.
Yeah, I personally think the issue with that is completely correct. But once you know text, you don't read the text, letter by letter. Obviously, it becomes a symbol. So I am not an icon man, but if we find useful icons, fine. The idea here, by the way, is to have an arrow forward or background, and half of it would be light gray if it was foregrounded or backgrounded. I just also wanted to show this screenshot of Author iOS and the small iPad. Look how beautiful all these options appear. You don't have to have a little bit and then hunt. Because the thing is, we will have commands such as ask AI. I'm not saying we have to have that, but there will be contextual specific things. So we can put that on the only select the bit of text, but often you want to do it for the whole thing. Like analyze this whole document. So that's why having a strip of commands at the bottom that are not too many could be potentially useful. I mean, something like an Ask AI, when it's on Mac, it is like this, basic hierarchy, which I guess it would be here too.
So do you think this, so back to the context menu versus the more palette-like thing that you described a moment ago, kind of a thing that stays in place and only lights up if it's relevant to the current action. That's one, and we also talked about the wrist palette at some point, kind of a one side of the Prism thing was for kind of context menu like actions. So where do you find, or where do you think the best interaction or the most fluid interaction, I think, is a good thing to go for here? The quickest action as well. I think quick is a good measure of simplicity and elegance here. If
Okay,
it's quick, I don't think the context menu really does that at the moment. I think going back to the earlier suggestions of palette menu, hand menu, close distance palette actions that floats in space, perhaps,
okay,
or
so-
contextual side icons that are next on the sides of the currently selected. I think those three things are stronger contenders for a fluid action.
okay,
Perhaps some gesture as well, but they are more restricted. We can only have a few of them.
okay. You can see my view, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to address some of the realities of what you're talking about now, because I find it different in the actual headset, those things, than what I expected. So here we have author. You may notice that it kind of flickers in and out, which is weird.
I'm not sure we're seeing what you think we're seeing. We're seeing what
Keynote.
looked like a keynote. Yeah.
Oh, really? You can.
Yep.
Hang on a second. So you. Oh, so
Haven't
you're
seen-
not saying clouds and stuff.
We haven't seen
Oh.
anything. We have seen a still image from Keynote and you gesturing.
Come on, me gesturing must be very entertaining. Okay,
Yep.
okay. So let me try that again. I'm trying to share my screen to this device. So I do this. Hang on, I'm just going to disconnect this. Okay, that is disconnected now. Very good. Now what do you see?
You staring at.
The heck?
I only see you.
Yeah. Same here.
Now I see Mark.
Well, you're seeing the speaker. Yeah.
Oh,
You'll see that.
for some reason share screen went off. Okay, now you're saying my desktop, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, and now you're saying craziness.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go into a virtual environment, otherwise I'll have this looping thing. Now you're saying beautiful clouds in Hawaii.
Yep.
Okay, so here is the current version of Author. So I find the trackpad and keyboard a lot better. So just even to click in. So if I now move this thing down. So this is ridiculous to me. That's all it is. I have to hit that tiny target, which often the eye tracking gets wrong. And then
So which topic are we on now? I'm a bit unclear. Are we on context menus or palettes, or have we switched topic?
No, we're on what you talked about. I'm addressing the fact of how to select things in actuality in the native apps. Because you were talking about context menu versus other things, right?
Yeah.
Right. So first of all, to actually select a span of text is hard. I don't think it's going to be much easier in WebXR. So I'm trying to move that. So this is the first thing we do not want to do. We don't want to have a tiny little pill menu like this with an arrow. It's ridiculous. Right? This should be much, much longer. So if I now try to do Ask AI, look at that, hardly anything. So I choose this one and I get the result here. This is similar to what we're looking at, is do an action on a thing that will result in something else, right? Right, guys, we will have these kinds of things. Like reformat this text or AI it or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah,
can I see,
some actions are like that.
Yeah.
Some are producing new content, some are moving it, and some are restyling it in some way, or removing it, or some are triggering other actions that are further away. So there are kind of 5 or 6 or several different categories of actions here that do slightly different things.
Yes.
before we whiz past, I see Peter's got his hand up. Peter, do you want to jump in with your question?
Yeah, I just want to say that for sit down XR, I really think it'd be nice if there was an option to drive the entire user interface purely from the keyboard.
You won't be able to do that because you mean keyboard on trackpad or mouse, right?
I mean your physical keyboard. If you have a physical keyboard or a Bluetooth keyboard
I
connected
understand.
to it,
But
you should be able to drive the interface by typing.
yeah, but you mean keyboard and trackpad, right?
Keyboard and trackpad, keyboard and 3D mouse,
Right.
but mainly keyboard.
Okay. I agree. I have to, the design for me to do author is complicated by the fact that it'll be both with and without a Bluetooth keyboard. With the Bluetooth keyboard, it's better. But just like what happened here, accidentally I selected something. I didn't mean to do that. And then I overwrote something. And you will notice on the screen, there is no undo button. Siri, remind me, mention undo in the letter.
How could they not have an undo button?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So these are the realities of this that we shouldn't fall into the trap of. So I do completely agree with you, Peter. In my experience, having a trackpad, which I'm going to now use because I have a dedicated trackpad just for this, it makes the interaction a lot easier. But of course, for the Sloan work, so now it wants to resize, but it doesn't want to go away. Right. Let me show you how the trackpad works. Yeah, okay. See here, the cursor, does it show up well?
Okay, but this is slightly different from what we're talking about. These are kind of native affordances that are not so. They are somewhat related, but they also feel like somewhat of a distraction to the discussion we had a moment ago.
Yeah, no, hang on. Peter took us in a bit of a direction, but I just want to show that when you have a trackpad, you don't need a 3D mouse or anything like that, but it works really, really well. So the point I was making is that, first of all, see this is a different menu because I used the trackpad. So that's just stupid. Whatever we are doing, this is so dumb. This is, and now I'm trying to undo and it won't do it. Okay. What can I do?
So what I take away from this is that actually you don't want targets that are too small. So whilst it might seem by today's sort of 2D sort of UI design standard that things should be sort of nice and inconspicuous, if you need targets that you can hit, especially by eye, because that's presumably where things seem to be heading, where, well, we're either using these, well, we're hoping, in other words, for anything except typing to actually do things like text input, where where things seem to be moving is we're going to be using hands or eyes.
And voice.
Sorry, yes, well, voice gets around the problem of the box being big enough or small enough.
Voice is a bit of a problem though, because you still, in many cases, have to select something in order for the voice to know what the voice should apply to.
Yeah.
For instance, I cannot say undo, Siri undo. Siri will just say, what are you talking about? Which message would you like me to unsend for some reason, right? I don't know how that is in WebXR, but you still have to.
But we could do that in WebXR, at least on Apple, and with some more. If we want to have a command that is a voice command that is undo, we could have that in WebXR. Vision Pro has the web speech API that we can translate to commands, but they must be triggered in a very thoughtful way and also executed in a thoughtful way, so we don't trigger them by mistake, and so it's easy to undo the undo, sort of say, or refine the undo if we meant something else. But it's possible, and that will certainly be the future of XR voice. It may be one of the strongest components, but I think the interfaces have not caught up to that yet. It starts
and
to
I
come
wonder how
online now.
it may vary by language, but I know English can be delightfully imprecise when you get, this thing is not that thing. So there's an awful lot of things that turns out are actually depend on a lot of context that the voice alone can't actually deliver. But that's that's a discovery we're yet to go through.
So guys, this is not a design exercise, what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is just trying to figure out what commands should be for different things. So we can discuss that.
Well, are we talking about, sorry, I'm a bit confused here. Are we actually talking, when we say it's not a design exercise, therefore it doesn't really matter, we're talking about the affordance of the command then rather than what the command does or what the, what the text is, just so we're because otherwise we slide around a bit. We seem to be chopping between two things.
What I'm talking about is, when I'm talking about not design, all I mean is that whether it's going to be a text button or whether it's, or whatever, that's up for discussion. But we need to know what kind of things. I mean, one thing that is clearly different is the reference section and other blocks of text in the document, right? The reference section will have specific affordances. So, we were looking at the reference section earlier, but and we need to figure out what those affordances should be. But when you're looking at a block of text in the reading mode, what are the things we want? We want to have some sort of way to say, get to my special foreground reading, and then maybe one saying, have a white frame behind it or not. Mark this text, find a document, and maybe some AI. Any comments on this?
I think it's a bit early to do that. It would make more sense. I'd find this easy to understand. For instance, I don't think, do we have a sort of object model in the loosest sense of what the document is? So yes, we know an obvious thing is something like the citation list. So we clearly have text as well, and we're talking about a bit of text, but is that like a paragraph block address system? So what are the bits and pieces we're dealing with? I'm not sure that's something we've worked out.
That's for us to discuss and decide. But what I'm saying is that when we're talking about a block of text that is at least now arbitrary, it could be one paragraph, many paragraph, the whole document.
Well, what you might want to do, the thing is, there's a chicken egg there, because what you might want to do with it might depend on the granularity of the text that you're dealing with. I suspect it will differ. If you say we're looking at a whole section as opposed to say, I mean, probably the smallest block that we display, I would imagine, will probably be a paragraph. I guess you could drill down further. But if you've only got a sentence in scope, there's not much you can really do with it, apart from, unless you're drilling down because you want to use a drill down as a selection mechanism to give you the affordance of doing something else with that selection, where you might be annotating it, or you might be wanting to effectively copy it to put, or moving it or copying it to another place. So I suppose what I'm foregrounding is that talking about what the affordances might be without actually thinking about what you're doing could be a sort of exercise in slight futility, because when you come to actually use them, you find the things you've designed in there don't get used in the place where you thought they would. I think that's my experience of learning tools along the way.
That is what I'm trying to do. There are some.
Yeah, but what I mean is, so if we don't yet know what the granularity, say, of the text is, then how can we decide what it is we might want to do with it? So it seemed a more fruitful thing to do at this stage would be to have a better understanding of how we deconstruct the document.
But Mark, on that point,
Yep.
yeah, we're jumping back and forth between kind of text, as in prose like or long text blocks, and list like items. A library or a catalog is more like a list like thing. A reference list is a list like thing. An abstract is not a list like thing, perhaps. And so I think we're jumping back and forth between those two, and I think we should have two different separate discussions on how you highlight text and do actions, and which granularity, and all the list-like items. And I think many of the interaction design patterns that we have for list-like items could be a bit similar in that how if it's a context menu or different icons or palettes or other voice commands, I still think there is similar things you would do to lists, like moving between lists, moving from lists, creating a new, like detaching or dragging things out, highlighting things in list, pressing an item in a list, pressing several items in a list. So there are things that are very list-like, and I think just tackling those is what we haven't started with, or the reference list is a list and the library list is a list, and we haven't so far looked so much into the prose-like things or long text blocks. I don't think it's wise to conflate them here in the discussion, in the design discussion. And I think this is design, it's not styling things, and but it's certainly interaction design, and one of the most important parts of this, because this is what people will see. If we present them with a bit too slow interface, or if it's clunky in some way, or if we trigger things by mistake, which is a risk when you create new interfaces, it's really hard to do it well. So that's why I'm pushing for a design that is kind of removing a bit of the context menu issues. I think the current context menu is good in that it's big and in front, so it doesn't run into the problem Frode has with the small microscopic context menus and text selection issues there. But the problem is that it's big, triggered by mistake, and then in front of the actual things that you're selecting. And if you happen to select something by mistake, it's kind of covering the things you're working with, which forces things to be in your working memory instead of visualized for you. So I think we should look into ways of. It could be that just a transparent menu would work better. It could be that it's smaller. It could be that we separate different things of that context menu into different menus. It could be some things could be palette-like things. Others could be gestures, and it could be a lot smaller. But I would argue that most of the thing on the menu could be more integrated into the closer to the item, more on the side and less in front of the thing as a big block, modal block in front of it. That would, to me, that would feel more fluid, and I think the users would appreciate that. But it is also cost of implementation. But I think going forward from here, I think the building blocks are there. But if the context menu was kind of split up into different parts, with still being the buttons they are, but not in the text box in front, I think we would have a much more fluid interface. And perhaps some things could be a gesture as well, like dragging a thing out from a list could be a gesture, as it's very fundamental. But that is a slightly harder or more complex interaction.
So I understand this is probably one that well, Andrew Adam might answer for me. Is that with something like the contextual menu, such as we have at the moment, does it attach to the selected object, or does it attach to the sort of the view? So using as an example the reference list, if I select essentially, if I'm pointing at an item in the reference, is the context menu generated in relation to the objects I've selected, or is it just somehow within the list, as it were, that I'm looking at? No, there's no hidden angle to the question. I ask out of ignorance.
Yeah, so I'm not fully understanding what you mean by attach. So I'll give you like both answers.
Oh, sorry.
that I
What I mean
understand.
is, sorry. Where do you draw it? What it's drawn in relate. So, in other words, what is it anchored upon? Is it anchored upon the list, or is it anchored upon the item? Does that
So if
help?
you're talking anchor as in like physically attached, nothing. It's just in the scene. It just generates at the lowest level.
Okay.
However, if you're talking about what is it based upon with generation,
Yeah.
then it's basically it's fed information based on
Mhm.
whatever you select. So right now, say I have every bit of text anywhere has a type, a tag I've added to it. And if the tag happens to be, say, a citation, then the pop-up menu knows what to populate. And if it happens to be a reference, it populates differently. If it's a library document, it populates differently.
Okay.
It calls the same pop-up menu, just
Sure. I
different
think I was meaning
stuff.
something else.
Okay.
This was reflecting on something that had cropped up about, the menu was potentially occurring sort of in an inconvenient place. What I meant was, it's essentially like, what I mean is, so if I have something selected and I wish to draw a context menu, the context menu has to appear in space effectively at an XY position relevant to the thing that's calling it. Does that help at all? I was just trying to
Okay.
understand whether the context menu is in a sense something drawn within, say, the overall list, or whether it was drawn at a position relevant to, I
I
guess,
gotcha.
one corner of the selected item.
If I remember correctly, I think I draw it relative to the camera. So it's always going to show up kind of where you're facing, no matter where you're pointing.
Okay,
I
yeah.
think that's
So
how that
that might
works.
that might be inadvertently what's leading to the potential of it sort of being in the way. So it might want to basically, if it was, and if this is at all possible, effectively be drawn off based on the object that's being worked on. In other words, therefore it
Yeah, like
can't.
cursor position or something.
Yeah. And I don't have a fixed view on that because I'm not, I don't have the skill to do it. But you get what I'm driving at. It's in effect that if we know that it needs to be offset from the thing we're dealing in, then its chances of being in front of it or obscuring it are far less. So I see Fred has his hand up.
I see Rob had to go, but I see his question here is basically saying a user guide. And I think we should approach the design questions we're discussing now as though we're designing a user guide or a walkthrough, because the actual commands will absolutely be different depending on what you need to do and what it is, but you will need commands. So in order for Andrew to start experimenting so we can better understand both through writing list and to testing, I do think we need to do the design of how the option should appear and what the initial option should be. I don't think that is jumping the gun because we have a pop-up menu now that is far from ideal. So the user guide for Rob or anyone in the future needs to be, first, you click on a link on our webpage. That loads something that has a big sphere. It's got some text on it, says click, unless you have your own library, in which case you load it.
I
Once
would
you're
say, oh, sorry, Fred, I didn't know you weren't done.
No, it's fine.
I would say unless we want somebody to actively maintain this tutorial of sorts, this manual, we should probably not write it until shortly before the presentation in September, just because we're going to keep changing stuff, unless, like you said, if somebody wants to keep managing it and updating it.
I think I think that's my job to maintain it. I think it will change, but I am worried about kind of a constant questioning of layers and this and that. I think we need to we can do that on Mondays, but I think on Wednesdays it needs to be, we think this works, let's try it. And then we'll see how crap it is. The reason I went into author to show you things is there are so many unexpected things about selecting and text and all of this stuff, even in an environment optimized by the biggest company in the world. So that's why I think we should decide on stuff Andrew go off and sweat and build it a little bit, and then change it next week if we have to.
So I have one thought in that in terms of the sort of documentation is, and also I shy away from the visually descriptive. It seems a seductive way to do it, but all my experience of some decades of writing things for people who are starting without my knowledge is that tends to not work, because you don't at that point have a common model. So it's actually most useful to tell people what sort of things they may get. So I think one of the things that shines out from Rob's point is that, okay, so I go into this thing, what do I get? What are the sort of things I can expect to interact with? And that then leads you into the interactions you might do. If I just say to someone, you're going to see one of these, it doesn't tell me what I can do. It just tells me I'm going to see something. So it's not actually informative. It's describing the experience. It's not actually helping the person understand what they're
I
doing.
don't think we disagree on that point at all. I think what we need to do is have a firm, but to be changed, model of what we tell a person it is. So we've gotten to the point where they click on the thing. They're now in the library and they have the thing on the wrist. So we have to decide, how do you interact with the library? You can, scroll up and down, and we have to decide when you stop on a thing, what happens. Currently, it shows the abstract to the side. And if you tap on it, it opens that document into the non-library regular view, right? That's what we have now. But what we have as the library, so this, Andrew, this is a request for you actually. The library as it is now is basically a reference section. It's got numbers on the left. And Mark asked towards the beginning of the call, what kind of, does it not? Okay, okay, I just misremembering two different screens. Ignore that, that's fine. But Mark pointed out we may be showing too much in the library. Ideally in the library, probably should just show title, author, date, not a URL or anything else. What do we show right now?
We don't show a URL either. Mark was talking about the citations.
Okay, so in the library, we need to decide when you point to an item, should the only option be to open that, or should we have some sort of contextual options available? That's the first thing we need to decide on. Peter.
Yes, when I'm looking at the library, I'd also like to get a count of how many concepts are defined in that item, and maybe how many people or organizations or locations are referenced in it.
Okay, so you would like to, that's absolutely useful. So what you would like, when we have it, when you select an item in the library, you get the abstract maybe, plus additional stuff on kind of a...
Yeah, sort of the count of metadata categories. So I have a sense of, is this a real dense thing that has a whole number of concepts defined in it? Or is it just about one thing specifically?
Yeah, so what we all agree on, when you point to an item in the library, you should get further metadata, right?
Yep.
So then one of the other things we need to decide is the demo that we saw that Adam made quite a while ago of the ACM library, where you can select an item and then you see instantly what it cited and what cited it. Do we want this to be in our library view?
If it's feasible, I'd like it. I think my experience just from the unprompted comments of people who've seen that sort of display seem to be that they find it fairly immediately tractable. They get without much explanation what's going on, which suggests to me it's quite nice, and it's something that I would suggest works, and others here can correct me, but actually can transition quite nicely from a 2D to a 3D to an X, let's call it an XR space. In that.
Okay, so we agree we want something like that, right? Marcus said so.
Well, I don't take my word for it. I'm just one voice.
No. But Mark likes it, and Peter has done a heart. So then the question is, currently, when you select an item in the library, the metadata abstract appears to the side on the right. Do we want to continue that, and then have the further metadata, such as what Peter was talking about, and whatever's available there? Or should we have it left and right? Because one thing we have discussed, of course, is these views here quite a while ago, where we have so many hundreds of these, this kind of stuff, where we have different views of what's happening. My feeling is we keep what we have now because it's nice. And then all, quote unquote, I'm sure it'll be a ton of work, but when we have an item highlighted in the library, and on the right we have this little section of abstracts. To the right from that, we have all these lines showing what documents cite this document. And on the left, we have this.
Yeah.
But
I think we need to be. I think we need to be pragmatic.
Hang on, just a quick thing. Andrew, could you please send me a screenshot of the library right now while they talk, so we can together look at something, pretty please? Sorry, Mark. Yeah, please go.
No,
ahead.
no, and this isn't to sound above Nate, because I really like this what you're showing, but I'm conscious that very rarely do you have that there's sufficient metadata in akin to the stuff that Peter's mentioning, which is extremely useful if you have it.
Yeah,
but the
Mark,
reality is,
but Mark, a really important thing for the Sloan project is we have it. Right? Hang on. I really need to underline this. What we're doing is a proof of concept how interactions can be if sufficient metadata is made available. So we're using that.
Yes, I'm not arguing against it. What I'm trying to say is that just bear in mind that what we want to do is in designing this is to allow for the fact that it may or may not be there. So in other words, if you just have lots of blank boxes, I think it's sensible to presume that. So we design for the full set, but it's just to be mindful that probably the majority of the time, well, certainly until we have much richer, cleaner metadata sets for all of this, that most of the information will never be there.
Yeah, but we're not designing for that. But fair enough. But okay, so let's say. So let's say this is what we have today, with the exception of these commands down here. Let's ignore what they are. They're just placeholder for stuff. It may not even be there, right? So we want to show who cites this document and what it cites. One way, of course, is to have this stuff appear in line. That's kind of easy.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have, sorry, I'm just trying to make this a bit smaller.
I would say we can much more easily know what it cites than what cites it, because the document itself tells you what it cites. Without a much larger metadata set, and without re-arguing the point about having a perfect data set, a document does not know what cites it. It's only it can only know what cites it from a larger scope data set.
But a library, but a catalog does, right? So one thing we can do is do it this way then, right? So we have below is what it cites, and above is what cites it. That's one way of doing it. It's not the best.
Time generally flows left to right for most people, I think. So what goes before, what it cites being on the left and what cites it being on the right, would seem to be more culturally acute. I see Adam sitting right back. So am I saying something?
No. I agree, but we have one to few dimensions here. Because the list takes up and down space, and so it's a bit complicated. Or if we're going to use the Z direction, the depth direction in some way here to have the list or the time dimension visualized if we need to.
Yeah, I mean, what is the library currently organized, Andrew?
It's not. It just generates in the order that the JSON was created in. We can sort it, but for now it's not.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I appreciate Andrew's wrong because you can pick anything and someone will immediately say, well, that's not what I want. I mean, the reality is that there are a number of things, properties like date and author are probably date, author, and possibly the publisher with a very small p. And I let's not dive into what that means at the moment. But I think those are the most likely sort of sorts that you might want. And the reality is, if you had to fix it, it'll never be right for everybody. So further down the line, it was something. But I think what one could say is it will work on the presumption of there being a sort.
One thing that
Deliberate
is one thing's kind of a fun idea with the sorting is if we just offload it to the JSON library, no one will ever blame our software because they just imported a library that wasn't generated the way they wanted. And it's like, oh, okay, that's not our fault. But we could, of course, put sorts in if we want.
I mean, the hard part is that dependent on the source. I mean, I know we're using ACM stuff. The hardest part is actually getting the bit of the author you wanted to sort on, because name sorting, it gets horrendously complicated, and there are all sorts of cultural variables you have to put into it that, of course, we normally don't see because it just works because some other poor person spent an age on it. Year is easy, and that might be a low hanging fruit as a default sort.
So this is obviously rough and bad, but what do you think of the logic of something like this? Better designed and using the space. You have a main library list. Off to the side, we have the summary and whatever metadata we have. To the right of that, if we have any documents that we know cite this document, and to the left, we have what the document cites, using the kind of connecting line, highlighting it in the library as being what makes it come coherent.
So why are we printing a list of all of the documents cited? In the preview that we saw earlier that Adam had put together, it was just highlighting them with color. Why don't we just do something like that? It seemed elegant.
The thinking for me is that difference between reading space and thinking space. In the library, it is a bit of a thinking space where you have lots of small things. You don't read long paragraphs of text. So I feel that while you're in the library, that's a good place to see how things connect. And this is one of the ways you can see how they connect. Now, ideally, if you click on any of the documents to the far left or right, or double click or click to open or whatever it might be, that will then be the centered document. So you can see what that cite's and cited by. So it
Okay,
is.
I see, because you want more buttons then. Gotcha.
No, I want less
No,
buttons.
No, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like you want them to be clickable, and that's why just highlighting the color doesn't work.
Yeah. What I want is, so I'm moving up and down this list, and all of this stuff is instant. It's amazing. And then I get to this one. That's interesting. Oh, so-and-so cited it. Tap. This thing is now here. We go around, you do things, and hopefully what this thing here is indicating at the bottom is commands. We may very well have, and again, not necessarily visually like this. It may be icons, it may be disappeared. One here, which is sort by date or whatever. So, that becomes a view as well.
One other thing I think we'll need is some kind of method for scrolling if we start having large libraries. Because right now it fits like say 50 documents or something, but you start getting into like 300, it's going to stretch so far up and down that you're not going to be able to realistically see the top and bottom documents. So we'll need some kind of UI that scrolls it, whether that's another handle or if that's an actual scroll bar that you drag, whatever we decide. Or we can just choose to never make a library that large because of load time. But
well, here's the brilliant stuff that Adam designed to make sure you know what you're looking at, Andrew. The purple one is the document we're reading about here. So everything younger, of course, is what it cites. Older. Everything younger is what cites it. So you point to it, you get a bit more information about what that is. Very good use of space. So I'm wondering if we can take some of that logic with the scrolling and with the kind of lensing effect or whatever. because this looks nice. I mean, this is awful. This, you know, visually, this is absolutely horrendous.
The different exploratory modes, in a way, the interesting thing is going back for a second to the other display, the sort of like the temporal line. The top part of that, to my mind, lends itself to an XR space because you can just make that as sort of big as you want. There is an element of being able to think to actually zero in the thing you want. But for instance, in an XR space, the abstract, the bit at the bottom of that display, could in essence be a floating panel closely to you, but you could have a very large listing space, as it were, and the sort of those subtleties of highlight or color or things will allow you to effectively explore that. But it's a different sort of exploration, that one, to the one that's on screen at the moment. The first one I think is interesting in terms of trying to see where, when you may be looking through a corpus or something, just to sort of see, you know, is it just a singleton there that just exists in the corpus, or is it something that's richly interconnected? And it lends itself to all sorts of potentially further filters on it, because you could, you know, say, start to filter people without. Don't take this as a feature request, but I'm just thinking what it then allows you to do in due course, which is to say, filter on the number of connections. The view Fred was just showing, I think is perhaps more deliberate in terms of looking at the actual citation tree, and only that, in terms of one thing removed. One of the things that it does immediately say to me is you definitely want a history, because you're going to want to undo. Otherwise, you hit the Wikipedia problem. You're thinking, how on earth did I get here? And what was I doing when I started? And that might be that you, in two forms, it might be that you literally want to go back one, or you might want to allow for having a sort of a start point, and almost like a waypoint, that actually where I want to do is I want to scroll back 50 explorations, because what I was doing when I started this was I was looking at paper X, and I now need to get back on track and go back to that. So those two sort of history points, those two affordances both run off having a history, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And in this sort of a display, I think it's interesting. I know tools like Tinbox used to have a history, and it got rid of it because people said they never used it. But I think in this sort of exploratory mode, history is innate. You're very much in a browsing experience, so the history is relevant, going backwards and forwards, and you have less sort of noise of, oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Well, that doesn't really matter, because when you're actually dealing with the documents that lie behind all these list items, it gets slightly different, because often you're looking at something, but you're not really visiting it, if you see what I mean. And that's something that the user interface always struggles with, because understanding the user's intentionality in looking at something can be hard to guess from their inputs alone. But I think when you're navigating around what is essentially a tree, I don't think that's problematic.
Right. So one thing we can do is make the user work for this. Meaning, so just going straight back into this thing. So imagine we're in this view, and the user has to do the thing of clicking a button. One will be, let's say, open, so it's explicit. Another one will be or whatever. You click on citation links or whatever, and it does this. It hides the library. And we still have options here like open. And then we have something like back to library. Because now that you have this explicit, we may even title it. something like this, right?
They seem just, are they needed? I mean, in the sense of, if you've had the view explained, which you would need the once, then that's just extra noise, so extra text rather, you don't really need to read.
Well, I mean, you said the left to right thing, you know, that's in a Western alphabet. Some alphabets do go the other way around.
No, but I mean, to use the thing the first time, you would need to know that, you know,
No, but
something was
hang
made to you.
on,
The
hang
first
on.
time you see this, you will just for a second, you will see something. Will show you a document, and then it will show you the things it cites and the things it's cited by. I don't think it then becomes relevant to or necessary to label them. You can have them the other way around if you want, and that would be a preference, but that's way down the line from what we're doing here. I'm not sure that you need to have more text, because it's all something else you have to read, and the more stuff you have to read that you don't need, the more
Right.
the load.
Okay, so that's fair enough in many ways, but also if we look at, and this goes way back to our initial discussion of menus and options. Let's say you're in this view and you've decided that this reference section is something you want to work on. You want to be able to tear it away. So to have a title area, which maybe then you select somehow, gives you affordances for this. Maybe instead of having the bar on the side to move it around, maybe the heading becomes the thing we move by. I'm just spitballing here. I'm just saying, don't necessarily think, because also they will be like this by default, but maybe you want to do this for your workspace. So then it's nice to know what it is. Were you waving at us, Adam?
I'm waving to Andrew, who had to head out now.
Oh, okay.
He left.
Oh yeah,
He needed some water.
there is the time.
No, I take your point, Fred. I mean, that's moving ahead of where I thought we were, because now the difficulty is I could see 101 ways in which one could customize all these things. But if we were starting with the notion of being able to just see something in our library in the relation of its inbound and outbound citations, then I don't think you would need by default to show the labels for them. I don't think you need the labels as a selection point, because as we've shown, you know, some of the other views you can point at it and it can just show effectively a bar that you can use as a target. Though I totally accept that if you are to start to move the items around, you may wish to have a label to remind you what they were. So the information can be there. Whether it needs to be displayed is, you know, quite contextual. But I wouldn't say in the initial case, I think less is more.
Okay. I think in the initial case, more is more, because so we don't get lost. We can minimize over time, but I think it is good to have labels to begin with.
I'm not convinced, but I'm happy to disagree.
No, but Mark, if you can move these in different places and pin them, maybe you want to have 3 or 4 different reference sections, you should be able to do so. And you know,
but there are lots of, yes, I understand, but there are lots of ifs here. So we're now talking, we're now jumping from a view to a highly customized version of the view, and I just wonder if we're getting ahead of ourselves, because the ability to do the latter, I think, is some way down the line.
For us, it's obvious that the left is one thing, the right is something else. I don't think we can assume.
No, I didn't say it was obvious, but you will need to describe for the first time that people use things what they are.
Why would we expect them to remember it for all futures?
Well, I'd be very well. I really doubt that someone who'd use this once would actually forget which is what. And anyway, you can tell by the dates, because if something is citing something, it has to have a later date. And unless you're not showing the dates, I mean, that's the most obvious way you can work things out. So, you know, it's self-evident from the data there, I would say.
It's self-evident for someone who wants to read the dates and compare the dates between 3 different places. Okay, anyway, Peter.
Yeah. Maybe we could just have a drop-down menu over each side column, and then the user could pick what they want to have on each side, and whichever menu would then automatically be the label.
Yeah, well, this
So it's
this
sort of
is
do double duty.
this is exactly the kind of discussion I think we need to have. Yes, on what kind of what means through which we provide the options, and how we do the labeling. Absolutely. Obviously, this on the right here wouldn't have numbers, so just for clarity, I'm getting rid of the numbers.
Oh, it's 1
Uh,
o'clock. I'm gonna have to drop now.
Okay.
See you on Monday.
See you Monday. What
Bye.
are your
My thoughts earlier were driven partly by when I've shown people the sort of two source visualizations we're sort of talking about here that Adam did. The question that's never come up is people not understanding which is what, which is why I just think, you know, it's about paring back, because there's a lot of data in here. So the less that we show that we don't need, I stress need to show, I think the better, and it's kinder to the user.
I don't think it's kinder to the user. I think that's a kind of a blanket statement to make, Mark. That yours is kinder than what I'm suggesting, because
Well, okay, but I'm only just going off the experience of showing these things cold to people, and so well, you know, experience is what it is, so it's worth doing. I mean, this is why you show things to people. If that means nothing, fine, but I'm not going to done dish on this.
Mark, I'm not saying it means nothing, but what I'm saying, my software is demonstrably minimalist. So I clearly agree with the notion of not having clutter on the screen. There's no question about that. All I'm saying is, at this point, while we're still debating, deciding, and experimenting how to put options, how to display information, I think we should be careful about pruning back. I think it is useful to be able to say, these are references, and this is what it's cited by. I don't think it's a big thing. And if it turns out that later on we don't need it, I'll be very happy to get rid of it.
I mean, I think I'll restate my thing. I think it's way too early to be worrying about this level of detail. Adam.
So why are you so worried about it then? Why can't we just leave it?
Well, because it keeps being dragged out, so no, we must have it. So if that's what we have to discuss, I'm just responding.
Yeah,
to
Frode, it's you who's pushing this. You pushed this into the library discussion, so I don't think it's fair to to criticize Mark for that.
No, I'm not criticizing Mark for having the library discussion. I'm just saying.
No, but
he's
that is
fighting to
not
have this
what I meant.
removed, and I'm not sure we need to remove it. So, but yeah.
But I think there is a valid overall discussion in on as clearly we fitted the whole ACM hypertext set on a regular screen, laptop screen. So one question is, what does XR do here that can't be done, or what does XR do better? So there are some kinds of volume things, for example, that we display even more documents, for example. It could be that it displays the history, that all your interactions build up for a working session, that you start with a library, you pull out a few documents, follow the references, and that leaves a visible kind of a browsing session. So it's offloading. Instead of having lots of back buttons and undo histories, we could actually see where we came from, where we went, and kind of build up a traversal of the information space, kind of spatial hypertext, in that you lay it out. You follow this reference, you saw this paper, you took this paper and put it in the pile, this paper in the pile, you went there, then you went back again because you didn't want to follow that trail. So that's one way of visualizing time, your interaction for this session or a couple of sessions, but for let's say a browsing session that could be spread out in time as well.
Another thing that's overlooked, I know comes up, that I mean will hopefully filter through from the use cases, is aside from whether I have this document or not, and we tend to assume that all these things are available to us, is that whether I've used it. So, for instance, if I'm looking at something, have I used it? I'm avoid the word cited it, but in other words, have I used it in a past paper I've written? So is it something that has another aspect of importance to me? So what that element is showing is this new essentially is this thing that I'm now looking at new to me, or is it part of an existing corpus that is? So there's some sort of implicit knowledge that, or recognition there. That would be way too difficult to feed into the original things, plus the fact the metadata wasn't there to show it. If I do know, because actually Adam kindly asked me, one of the things that you put in there, I remember, was we colored up some spatial hypertext papers. But that's sort of an example of really what I'm driving at is, and the key, if keywording were better, which I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon in terms of papers, then that would be tremendously useful as a way, again, of visualizing stuff.
Yeah, but I see the lowest hanging fruit there, I think, is collections. Loosely defined collections, either by you that you want to pick out things, you basically a list or a collection, maybe with some list annotations as well, where you say why you have this list or why this item is in the list. But as its most basic set, it is a named list, or maybe not even named, but a pile of things. But to be able to send it and send it to others or remember later where it was from, I think you need some light annotations, titles or annotations. And so that doesn't really need a good keyword system. It just needs some sort of intuition or what you put in each pile. And I think that is something everyone wants. We have folders, we have desktops, we have PowerPoints where we push, and we have reference manager where we do making lists or collections is one of the most basic things in all kind of library or knowledge management. And I think there is much to be done there that could be, where actually XR, I remember when using our prototype, the flat screen version here, is I wanted to collect papers along the way, put them into a pile, and with XR we have the opportunity to actually see all the things we have in the pile as well, much more. So even if the whole data set could be visualized in a very compact way, like lights lighting up like we did before, the actual papers could pile up and in a visual way, and actually be represented visually on screen and to be taken to another device later on. Or
what you're describing is essentially a form of exploration many of us probably would like to have done, but we couldn't do before because we didn't really have the interface. So now, and making some assumptions about data, but now essentially if we have that data, we can put it essentially onto the big screen. So going back to Brandal's comment about just making insanely wasteful use of space, we can do that. We can have a very big screen, and obviously there's some accommodation that has to be made that the bigger it gets, the more we have to think about sort of being able to focus bits we need. But it's absolutely possible in a way that, as Alice rightly said, there is the problem with a finite sense of a browser window where you can only put so much in. If you make it too small, you just can't see anything. But I think, and one interesting part, again, thinking of actually both of those visualizations, is that the thing that's in focus actually is something we could, in an XR space, pull out. So that can be closer to you, sort of readable and big, and then you can have a much bigger hinterland of this related data, related by, be it by citation or membership of some other set. So I think that's one massive win in relation to references that you get with XR.
I have guessed apparently. I need to see what guest. I'm here, but I'm muted for it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's past the hour. So yeah, at some point we need to decide where to have buttons, but I guess that was not for today.
Well, I think a useful thing that we seem to have you're absolutely right, and something I think that would make that easier to discuss. Freud just mentioned we need to think about buttons in the general sense of the word, not literally skeuomorphic buttons, but things we can interact with. And I think that's right. But one of the things that today's reminded me of is, maybe I've missed it, but I think we've whizzed past a point where we just had a sense of the not the addressable parts of a document. I know that's sort of angels and pinheads because you can keep drilling down, but there definitely are a number of, or there's almost like an explicit map of the document. So there are things like, you know, references are clearly they're an obvious one to think of, and things like the abstract, but because in a way it's in a hypertext of the document. And as many of the things that we are visualizing are sort of lists and outlines and maps, having a greater view. And why do I say that? Because it then links to, well, what are these buttons going to do? Where are we going back to and from with these buttons? Otherwise, we will just be looking at things like editing and annotation, which are fine, but are not the whole of the user's need.
I agree with the importance of addressability, but practically with Author, the way I've been doing it on the different platforms, you have global and then you have selected when it comes to the document, not when it comes to the references necessarily. When it comes to the selected, that's not always useful or easy, but and also, do you mean something like you have a cursor in something and you tell the system, I want to have a command based on this sentence or this paragraph? What do you mean by it?
No, I was thinking about, so you were showing an example of say some text, and I was just thinking, yeah, I was thinking, I find it hard to think about what that might be because I don't know why, I don't know what this text is in relation to its source, is how much of it is, why I opened it, because why I opened it will dictate what it is I think I want to do with it. So just having a box with some text in isn't to me meaningful as a starting point to work out what the controls would be.
That text is your document.
Yeah, but it could be interesting to go back to. We talked about that, Frode, in a private design session where we brainstormed around that, pulling out parts, named parts of of an academic document, pulling out the abstract and conclusion part, for example, intro, abstract, conclusion, and gluing them together and stripping away everything else. Perhaps or having those as toggles where you could have a view, like different parts of standard parts of an academic document that are either extracted from good data, like a very pure text, or slightly handheld by either perhaps an LLM can assist in finding it, and you adjust it per document once for just a single time per each document, that you preview what an LLM thinks is abstract, and then you say, okay, thumbs up, this is abstract with this one, and then you have an object that is.
I agree on that, but when it comes to being able to issue commands, I don't think that's relevant, because you will be issuing relevance based on something you can tell the system what it is, right? And when you're reading a document, whether you're reading a background chapter or a specific chapter, you know, it's basically text in the document. You will select a group of text to tell the system what you want to do. Do I agree that we should have views, for instance, where each chapter is a vertical scroll, for example? Absolutely. Right.
Well, I think we're talking about different things, perhaps. I'm talking about the library view or library list, and in relation to document specific kind of previews or snippets from that document, and metadata snippets from the document, and perhaps references as well, but they are more clear cut in what they are. But if we want to have a way of browsing a library of which some papers are a bit unknown to you, you don't know them by heart. Most papers are perhaps like that. You know some by heart, but most of them are in your squirreled away collection, things you've downloaded but never read. There you want a good way of getting a sense of what this document is about. The summary is one thing, the abstract is one thing, perhaps keywords. Author and institutions are of course very important, but there are kind of views into the document. There are small snippets from the document that need to be extracted either by good metadata or by hand, or perhaps an LLM where you approve the previews and store them, persist them. So that is what I'm talking about.
I agree with all of this, but I don't understand why we can't start. You know, we have a pop-up menu in the current version, which is not very good, either in terms of
In which view? In the library view? No,
all of them. It's the same kind of pop-up. It's in the document in library view. Okay. It's not in the library view.
No.
It showed up. It was a mistake that it showed up. It was a rendering error, but okay.
Yeah, so not in the library view, because there we have a list and abstract or something, list and intro right now.
I'm not sure what's going on in this discussion, because we will need the means through which we can tell the system what we want it to do. And
Yeah, we're going around slightly circles, because I understand that the thing that it shines out that you want to do is to start listing the interactions that you have for certain blocks. What's being brought up is the fact that what those blocks are is not necessarily clear. So in order to understand what
which blocks are we talking about? Library now?
No, the thing that you keep going back to is wanting to be able to know what you should do with a window of text. That seems to where we keep being rotating back to, and that was the picture you're showing us earlier. I understand that, and the point we're trying to make is that yes, you want affordances, and the style of that is something that we've had some useful discussion on. I mean, you know, in terms of the intensity you give it and the way that you think about foregrounding and backgrounding things, but exactly what's on there they're just labels to buttons that point to something. We don't yet know, because we haven't properly discussed why you're looking at that text. Something that this really shines out in a sense from the use case. Not everyone uses documents the same way, even within the context we're discussing. So understanding why you're looking at that piece of text is actually very relevant to what goes on there. Otherwise, you end up with 64 options which you don't use. So and there won't be a one size fits all. What we really need to understand is to not tie the button labels too clearly into the buttons, so to speak. We can usefully describe the buttons. I wouldn't worry about what they point to at this point, because we just don't know. We haven't. When
you say what they point to, do you mean commands or text?
The commands, because I mean there are a small number of things that are given.
Mark, my turn. Okay, we do have specific use cases. We've gone through them with Dini. They're listed on the website. The first one is reading documents to prepare to write an academic article. So we do know some of this, right? And there are some commands that we do know that we want. We want, for instance, when you're in the library, you want to be able to open a document, right? That is one thing we do know.
Yes, but that's not the interface you were showing us. Something that was to do with having a piece of text and what you might want to do with it. It was about asking AI and stuff. And I'm not sure we're there yet. There are the sense is, if you have a bit of text, you might want to, the sense is, are you going to take it and use it somewhere else? Are you going to annotate it in the loosest sense of the word, i.e. you might be tagging it in some way, or you might want to highlight it visually or something, but let's class those as annotations. There are a whole grab bag of things which include things like AI summaries that you can do, but those are add-ons that some people might want, others might not want. They're not necessary parts of it.
Mark,
I mean,
Mark, you cut me off, yes. But there are some things that we do know, okay? If you have a piece of text on your non-library reading area, as we've discussed today, you will want to have things such as, should it have a white background or not, which we may call framed for the sake of argument. Also, should it be foregrounded or should it be in the background space? These are interactions that we know we want. Other
Okay.
Yeah,
interactions,
and we covered them today, but what we're in the things you're kind of leading the design on here, we haven't really specified what use case. We can't just say all use cases, it must be a specific, or one or two use cases perhaps could be combined into one. So when we're designing this, we're designing a bit blind, or maybe you know which use case you selected from the long list of Sloan use cases or Dini use cases, but that hasn't been discussed at all. Are we researching a paper, then we want to skim the collection in a certain way. Are we reading our own favorite papers? We need very different buttons appearing or a bit different abstracts or references. So
yes.
that is the essence of the kind of confusion we're designing without the use
Yes.
case.
Adam, yes, okay. Hang on, I'm going to stop recording for a second. Yeah, sorry for the interruption there. So the thing we're talking about is there's one thing about interacting with the text according to a use case, which is really important and we need to have much more discussion on. There's also the mechanical interactions or where to put something, foreground, background, and so on. And we need to look at interactions for that. I'm being simplistic and just putting text labels. Adam wants much more intuitive control, such as gestures and icons and that stuff. I completely agree that these approaches need to be experimented with. And I hope that next week we can continue. Hopefully, some of us can do some of this offline. And I'm very, very grateful. This is a very, very difficult discussion, but it is an important discussion. And from my side, summary, I would just like to thank you for this. Any other comments from you guys before we go evening time? All right, evening time.
We can
See you later,
drop
guys.
some comments in Slack.
Bye.